Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler, still really poorly. How you doing? I hope you're all happy and healthy, doing the things you love with those that you love to do them with. We've got some transfer news, views and clues for you this Saturday afternoon. It's 2 o'clock at the time of recording. This should be up, I don't know, as soon as I can. Guys, smash the like button for me if you enjoyed transfer news, views and clues. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell. And drop a comment, let me know your thoughts on today's topic. One take Tottenham is usually not one lung Tottenham, but I forgot about breathing just then. Guys, let's get into it. We've got some stories regarding midfielders. We've got Jurrien Timber's twin brother, Quentin Timber from Feyenoord, a midfielder. I think he's 23 years old from memory. A really good player. He's agile. He's again 6'8", 10", one of these versatile players. Same with the next name we're going to be talking about in a second. Tactically, he looks very smart, very accomplished. He can sort of see the wood for the trees in the way that the game is progressing, and he's kind of a tempo merchant from what I can gather. Someone very young who has the ability to be able to control the pacing of what is going on around him, whilst also carrying the can of having to transition Feyenoord from defence into attack as he does, is a very, very, very unique, not unique, wrong word, very in-demand skill set. And I think that he is going to go on to big things. From what I can see, it's always difficult to tell what is the calibre, how do you transition, the Dutch league into the Premier League. Does it always work? It certainly doesn't in the world of strikers. We've seen both at Tottenham and across the Premier League a never-ending list of players that had huge numbers and big potential coming out of there that just didn't really transition into the Premier League. So maybe this one's a little bit of a too hard to judge right now. He gets a goal every 5 games, give or take, but he's not really that sort of player. He's a progressive player, a good reader of the ball, and someone who he creates a lot of efforts, creates a lot of shot. I think his goal creation or shot creation stats are right up there, 90th percentile across Europe. For a guy very young, for a guy who has a lot of different responsibilities as well, it's no mean feat. I'm a big fan of this guy, but do I think he's going to come to Tottenham? It's a horses for courses thing. Do I think we need him? It depends on what we do with the likes of Bissouma, what we do with the likes of Bentancur, what we do with the likes of Pape Sarr. Is he that dissimilar to Pape Sarr in terms of his ability to drive with the ball and run at pace? No, there's a lot of overlap there. I'd say that he's more clever with his passing. He doesn't necessarily give too many balls away. That Pape Sarr can be frustrating at times with his ability to interpret, intercept, anticipate and all that stuff is absolutely phenomenal. His ability to cover blades of grass is absolutely phenomenal. But sometimes he gets the ball back and then he either shoots from distance too often and wastes a good opportunity, or his passing can be array at times, and so that can be a little bit frustrating. But listen, he's still young, and I do love Pape Sarr and have big hopes for him. With Quentin Timber, as I say, I think he's slightly probably better in some of those departments, maybe not quite as good in others. A young player, lot of admiration for the guy. I just don't think that it's necessarily something that we really need right now, especially if we're keeping Bentancur, if we're keeping some of the others as well, Lucas Bergvall, who are stepping in. I'm not putting this in the kind of young upstart thing. He's 23. He's of an age now where you can sort of judge him on his merit, not necessarily on his potential. But with him, his twin brother being at Arsenal, do we really see that happening? I'm not sure. I don't think so. It'd be interesting to see if there was that kind of relationship, that we could have a little bit extra spice in the banter. Who's taking home the plaudits in the family? It would be fun, but I just don't really see it happening. And look, the links are coming from that direction, not really something that we're seeing over in the UK. So we'll see, wait and see on that one. But a really good player and someone that we should keep an eye on and keep our finger close to the dial on that one for you guys. Andy Diouf is the next guy. Again, not a dissimilar style of player. Plays for Lens in France, 21 years old. A versatile player, versatility over specificity. I'm getting sick to death of having to call this one out. He's all over the park. His heat map is just like a block of orange. He covers everywhere, and he doesn't seem to spend too much time in any one particular position. A France under-21 international is an ever-present. I don't think he's had a real injury yet in his career. He's a left footer as well, which adds a little bit more to the mix, and again has that kind of ability to do a little bit of everything. He's a 6, an 8, a 10. He can get forward, create. He's got a lovely pass in him, but he's not afraid to get stuck in. I'm all for these players. I admire and respect the graft of being an all-round midfielder. I just think that it's a horses for courses conversation. And as I said for the last guy, for Timber, whilst we have the current crop of midfielders we We don't need any more of the same, even if they are all slightly different in their makeup, in their nature, in their offering. When you have an 8 that can do a bit of this and a bit of that, we have more 8s than a betting company. It is ludicrous to think that we are still being linked with more. The only way I can get on board this is if we are planning to sell more than one midfielder. If we are planning to sell Bissouma, then for me the priority has to be a 6. And I don't care anymore about the idea that versatility is key for an Ange system. And it's been useful in as much as, because of the injuries that we have faced this season and last, having versatile players that can do a shift in different positions seems to be, carrying some weight as a justification for that strategy. And I get it. But again, we've got enough young players, enough 18-year-old talent, and enough versatility to last me a lifetime. I need some specificity. Again, I'll point you back to Manchester City with Rodri, Manchester City without Rodri. That specific player and his specific skill set is the difference between the world's best team or a team that loses, 5-7, 5-8 or something. So, again, good players, Diouf and Timber. Both of them would probably add value at some point in some department, but I just don't see it. I don't really fancy any more absorption of budget in promising talent or just players that don't really obviously fill a gap and just end up being leveler-ups of the overall squad. We've got enough of those as well, to be honest. Let's go to the next story, guys. Richarlison to Newcastle /Fluminense. This one is fluming crazy, isn't it? We heard earlier this week, that Richarlison, it wasn't a quote from him, but from people that know him, sources close to the player, said that he is, they didn't say he's happy at Tottenham. They said he's not leaving Tottenham. He wants to stay because his priority right now is to get back into the Brazil national team for the next tournament. And look, I have no problem with South American players who prioritise and love the fact and consider it an absolute priority in their life to play for their national team. But you as someone who's not a South American national, you don't benefit from that, and you're already facing the consequences of the prioritization of previous players that have ended up with like a lack of respect or a lack of willingness to play for your team when you know that they've got a national game, a big tournament coming up, and they seem to be absent for you and present for them. They're not, like, they're injured for you in other circumstances, and they play there and get injured again. We're seeing that at the moment. It doesn't seem to matter what countries representatives we're talking about here. It seems to be a common theme. I don't hate the idea of people loving to play for their country. I just would like to think that there is a little bit of recognition of who's paying your bills, who's paying your wages, and that Tottenham is also a priority. And I don't really ever feel like Richarlison offers that. I don't think like Romero offers that, and I didn't think that Lo Celso did either. And there's a long list of players that have played for South American teams that I feel that have that kind of priority. That is just a little bit grinding, a little bit grating for people that aren't from that part of the world, and so don't benefit from that loyalty, but are a recipient of the cost of that relationship as a Tottenham fan. So I'd like Richarlison to go. I would like him to go. I don't like the idea of him hanging around. It kind of it's reminiscent of the Ndombele thing. I don't really feel like he's a value-adding member of the team, especially at the cost. £60 million is what we spent for him. I said at the time it's far too much. I've only ever thought of him as a £30 million player, regardless of the inflation in football. And I really don't see anybody else paying that amount of money, even if there was willingness on his part to leave. Now, let's talk about that willingness. Well, when he says he doesn't want to leave the Premier League or he's happy where he is, I think what he's really saying is the idea of playing in Saudi Arabia for money is not really in his thought processes right now, because obviously the Brazil thing. And maybe in Brazil, there isn't the same respect or credibility that's offered to people that play in Saudi Arabia. But what about Newcastle? Newcastle United are in the Premier League, and look, there is rumours out today yesterday as well, that he is on their list of desired players. But Newcastle have only got 4 really fit strikers or forwards at the moment. They've got Joelinton, Callum Wilson's out with a hamstring injury until February. It's not a long-termer, but it is obviously, I think he's got an injury proneness that is concerning. They don't really have too much in the way of options. They've got Anthony Gordon, who's a different sort of player, can play off the wing. Obviously, Richarlison can too, but not the same style of winger. And then they've got Alex Isak, who's one of the best strikers in the world. I think they've also got a younger guy who I forget his name, but he hasn't really crossed my mind too much to know whether he's where he is in the kind of stack rank. But what I would say is that Richarlison versus those other four, for me, he's at the bottom of that list. And so would he go to Newcastle if Newcastle really wanted him? Maybe he would. Maybe he would find it more difficult to get game time there than he would at Tottenham at the moment. But he's injured anyway. Newcastle have got a track record of bad injuries. I don't really understand why a team that have struggled with injuries would want to buy a player for peak valuation that's over the top anyway, when that player is also known for his injuries and who, may or may not want to leave. I personally would say that if the argument is he doesn't really care about playing for Tottenham, he just cares about being on a platform where the eyeballs of the world are looking at, like the Premier League, then Newcastle is an okay option. But it's about whether he gets fit and whether he gets to play. And I don't think either of those things are necessarily certain at Newcastle as much as they are at Tottenham. So I'd find it a stretch. Also, Newcastle, despite having all the money in the world under the ground, can't really spend any of it right now because of their FFP situation, which I think is slightly less of a problem than it was last year, but still not in the world where they can start to throw money around. The £60 million is what apparently Tottenham are asking for Richarlison. Listen, for me, Daniel Levy on this one made a mistake in the Richarlison transfer originally, and if I had my way, I would want the club to shake hands with the fact that you overpaid. Doesn't mean that someone else should have to overpay to cover for your mistake. I would bite your hand off to get £40 million back for him. I don't see it happening. Let's talk about the last part of that story. Fluminense. Flumin crazy. Brazil team. I don't really know whether they can afford 40, 50 or 60 million pounds. I did do a video, believe it or not, on Sean Butler TV earlier this year, that was talking about the investment into Brazilian football from American investors, and that the multi-club ownership thing is taking hold over there, and it's bringing a resurgence and a invigoration to Brazilian football from a financial perspective, and it's not without its problems, but it certainly does have some green shoots of recovery. I don't know whether that has transitioned into a lot of money in the Fluminense pot. I don't know where that story came from, I forget, but it is out there in the zeitgeist. Go and check it out. Let me know your thoughts. Would Richarlison take up the option of moving home to Brazil? Would that help him or hinder his chances of playing for Brazil? I'm not sure. Most of the time, it's a one-way traffic, isn't it, from Brazil to Europe for these players who are good, who want to play for Brazil, and they only really ever go back that direction either after they've retired or towards the end of their career to pick up some sort of limelight, in Indian summer, shall we say, in their career. But yeah, I don't really see this story happening. I think we're stuck with Richarlison for a while, and so I'm going to also give this one out. So Quentin Timber, Richarlison, and Andy Diouf. Those are the three stories that we've got today in terms of transfer guides. I don't really see either of them happening, but the two younger players, the midfielders, really interesting players. Keep an eye out for them. I put them through the Y Scout, and I do like the look of them, and I will certainly be adding them to a hot list and a short list of potentials for the next time that we actually need an 8. But right now, I am not having or hearing anything else other than a bloody 6. We need that mark of the beast. We need a beast figure. And he is by the name of 666. Guys, let's talk about PCP Staveley, the woman from Newcastle fame, who's put together £500 million. Apparently it's coming in the shape of private equity, and Tottenham are a port of interest for her and her investors. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention today is because in the news, there's two conflicting arguments. In French media, it's saying that QSI is actually really still interested in a minority stake in Tottenham. £500 million would probably be about the 20 percentile mark. Now, I'm not sure. It didn't really clarify in the article whether or not that QSI are interested in working with Staveley or whether it's a completely separate thing. I'd be surprised, because the other stories that came out earlier this week were saying that if Staveley is going to look towards Tottenham, she's getting the money from the East, but it's not coming from anyone that is connected with or a part of the royal families of any of these kind of oil nations. And so on that basis, you can kind of chalk off Sheikh Jassim. And again, I think there was a quote earlier this week from someone within his cohort that said he hasn't given up on Manchester United and he will not invest in another Premier League club, in the hope that at some point in the future he will be able to buy Manchester United, such as his love and adoration of that club. Now look, obviously the Glazers decided to work with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He was willing to accept a smaller stake initially with the view to take over in the long run. Most Manchester United fans were probably looking at the two options and wanted to go with Sheikh Jassim, because obviously the idea of having a trillionaire or whatever running your football club, to those people that don't understand or haven't looked into or fully comprehend the new rules as they are with regards to what that offers you in terms of additional spend, additional wiggle room in your FFP, is not quite as clear cut as it used to be with the likes of City and the likes of Abramovich back in the day. So it's not the same, but they also would have coupled that idea of the dream world, even if they don't quite understand how much of a dream it is, with the reality of looking into Sir Jim Ratcliffe and what he did with Nice, and how he wasn't really a game changer there. He didn't really do magnificent things in terms of generosity and putting his hand in his pocket and supporting the club financially at his own loss, which, shock horror, is not really something that most businessmen want to do, and not the reason why they get into football. The rules may appear to be different as a fan, that because it's not a business, it's a football club, therefore you should put your hand in your pocket and sustain my expectations, my impatient expectations at your cost. And if you don't, I want you out. But if you do, then it still doesn't work, then I still want you out. And I'm not going to be grateful anyway, because you're lucky to be the owner of my football club. Either way, the Sir Jim Ratcliffe thing, he came in and his first movements have clearly been, not of the desired impact, and it's been more around cost cutting, efficiencies, looking for areas for improvement, of which there are many, no doubt, in the Manchester United setup. And look, some of the kind of more level-headed content creators that I see and hear say things like, this is kind of what you wanted, but the cold light of day is that to get to where you want, you have to go through the first bit, which is the audit and the cleansing, and that's what he's doing. Time will tell whether or not Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to be a good owner, and time will tell whether or not the Glazers move on and allow for him to take over. Time will tell whether United fans get on board it or get frustrated with it and start to, drum up new resentment and issues with this kind of new model, rather than accepting it and pushing for him and them to sell to Sheikh Jassim. Either way, from a Tottenham fan perspective, I would say that Sheikh Jassim isn't going to be taking over Tottenham anytime soon, and neither will QSI in all likelihood. I just don't see the relationship. I tend to believe the first former press releases that were saying that Staveley isn't going to be involved in any oil nation relationships with the Royals. It's more private equity businessmen, but that money just happens to flow from there rather than west with America. Now look, I personally think that Daniel Levy would rather go west. As I said before in a video, I think that he's looking for investment from private equity on that side of the coin, on that side of the water. We saw last week the Dallas Cowboys story that was a load of junk anyway, but the notion that he was going to take over Tottenham, I think it was a wind up, but people kind of bought into it and then realised quickly that maybe there are options to consider here where new doesn't necessarily mean better. And in the case of that guy who's got a track record that's worse than Daniel Levy apparently in terms of his running of the Dallas Cowboys, that maybe that is a pause for thought moment for people. But for me, I think that there is obviously demand for access to the Premier League from the West, from America, from private equity. There's a never-ending list of private equity companies that would probably wouldn't bat an eyelid at spending 4 or 5 billion on a franchise, a football club, or whatever you want to call it, that is going to offer the sorts of opportunities to have loyal fan base customers. Even though you hate that phrase, I know you guys do and I do as well, but that's just the reality of it. But on top of that low-hanging fruit of a potential Netflix for sport that could provide future Premier League owners and Premier League clubs a 4 times increase in their broadcast and media revenue, which is absolutely a monster deal that won't happen in the next 4 or 5 years, but it might happen in a few years down the line. Is Daniel Levy looking for that NFL thing? Is that maybe why we are going to sign that Cardoso midfielder from Betis? He's American. What about Jonathan David, born in Brooklyn, plays for Canada, dual citizenship in America and Canada? Does that whole thing sound a little bit like someone's giving the wink and the gun towards a new look, new feel towards American market for attention, for money? We did sleep on the opportunity to go out in the summer for the last 2 seasons and participate in those micro tournaments that all of the other teams around us in the Premier League went that direction. We went off to career, with Sonny maybe tailing off. If this new guy that's come in, Heung Min and spit on that thing, if he isn't going to make it at the top level, then have we put all of our eggs in that financial basket of career too much, too long? Are we now going to play catch up and try to come after that American money? And if so, is that possibly why we're looking at Cardoso and also Jonathan David to be able to get that American attention, that Canadian attention, and then also go over and then Daniel Levy go and do his NFL thing. I don't know. Remains to be seen, guys. But in terms of the Staveley thing, the QSI thing, it doesn't make sense. If she's already got £500 million in investment from somewhere, it isn't QSI. That much is for sure. Are they really interested right now? I would say no. With the political hotbed as well of the Jewish club ties historically, and the kind of the Arab world, I guess, in the Middle East, is there really that kind of appetite for any kind of, like I say, political hot potatoes in that regard? I'm not going to discuss that. I don't even understand the politics of that particular region. It's far beyond my level of comprehension. So it's not something I'm going to dabble with, but I know a lot of people think that it is a relevant factor and therefore probably an off-putting element. And that's another reason why, if you're going to see new investment in Tottenham, probably look west rather than east. We shall see what happens with the Staveley deal. But that's it for me guys. Andy, Diouf, Richarlison and Quentin Timber. Let me know your thoughts. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, bye-bye.